Hello and welcome to Stories That Shape Us. My name is Joanna Daniel. Today I want to talk about how we can shift the culture of silence around sexual abuse. At the beginning of the week, I did say we're going to raise awareness this week around sexual abuse a little bit more, talk about it some more. And we had a guest yesterday, a psychotherapist, who was talking about the impact of sexual abuse on relationships. And so today I want to talk about how we can shift the culture of silence around it because it's important because in that silence is shame. I read a post this week that says the average age for a woman to disclose sexual abuse is 52. 52 years old. That's somebody that has carried that pain for many, many years and is talking about it for the first time. And I know that it's not easy for people to disclose, to talk about it, and that's because there's a culture of silence. That's because there's so much shame around the subject that people are afraid to talk about it. It was trained into us that we wouldn't talk about it. So how do we shift that? I think we have to shift that by having honest, open conversations whenever we can, like conversations like this. Whenever we can have conversations around it where we can name it, where we can say it, where we can honestly call the thing what it is. And we start doing that by saying it everywhere. You know, more people are now doing trauma informed, are more doing trauma informed practice. More people are doing trauma. We have a trauma informed Bible study pack that we have available here at Wounds to Scars. We have a trauma informed mental health awareness pack, and coupled together because we are interested in helping churches have conversations that are inclusive of people who experience trauma, that our experiences will not be put to the sideline and relegated to one day a year, but it will be integrated into sermons, into conversations, into Bible studies. But one of the conversations I think that is necessary is when we start to talk about Bible, what happens in the Bible in its real and honest context. One of those stories I believe is David and Bathsheba, where power, she had no power, she had no control, but whenever those stories are talked about, then somehow the blame is levied at her feet. When we think about the story of Tamar and Ammon and how she is, I heard the conversation around sexual purity and she was included in that conversation. And I thought, well, what really happened to her? Because there was nothing that she could have done. We all know what happened. Can we say what happened? But so the culture of silence also speaks to blame, a culture of blame that we have for victims, where society often blames victims for the tragedy and the trauma that they experience. And we know that 1 in 3 women experience sexual trauma, and that is reported. So we know that the numbers that we're looking at is probably far higher than that. It's the ones that were reported, the ones that aren't reported, that the people that are suffering in silence, quietly in pain, because of this culture of silence, because of the way society blames, because of the way sometimes when it's disclosed. And what I read on that post about women, the average age for women to disclose is 52. What I read was that people are afraid to disclose because of the blame that will be levied at them, the responsibility that victims are often given around where you were, why you were there, what were you wearing, what was your attitude, why were you like that, why didn't you just. And so all of those questions is victim blaming. And so people are reluctant to disclose because of the blame that they know will be given to them. And some of them know by experience that the blame will be given to them. And so they might share it with one person and will never talk about it again. Some people use other people's experience to know that it's not a good idea to talk about this subject, because if you talk about it, that's what will happen to you. We see that especially when there is allegations against somebody that is famous or popular, whether it's a celebrity or a politician or an influencer, how much people will come to the defense of the alleged perpetrator, and the victim will be seen as lying or loose, or any one of the other words that society will make up to blame the victim for whatever has happened. Now, there's not to say that things don't happen where there are people who are not honest, but we think in the majority of the cases it is not so. And so the culture of silence is because it's learned silence. We knew how to be silent. I remember a couple of years ago, I wrote a blog post on our website around the culture of silence, when a young girl was assaulted and she reported it. And her friends at school cornered her when she got back to ask, why did she report it? That was significant for me because I'm thinking, well, how do they know that we're not supposed to talk about it? They're young people, they're in their teens, late teens. How do they know that you're not supposed to report it? You're supposed to just carry on, you're supposed to just be, and you're not supposed to report it and pursue anything. How do they know that? Was my interest. And I wanted to know more about that, because what that tells me was that we weren't getting better as people, as humans. We were actually training into our young people what was trained into us. And we thought this generation, for example, people my age, we were more enlightened, we had more information available to us, we had access to all this information, and we were growing and we were becoming more enlightened, but not so much, because what we do, and this is the fascinating thing about values, that it's important that we know, because the values that we have is the values that we inherited, and those are the values that we'll pass on. And so when we're not aware of these values, then we just pass them on. I am always amazed when I talk to people who I assume is going to be compassionate to victims, that will say, oh, well, but they, these young people these days, the way they dress, or you can tell that they were trying to gain attention, or, any one of those things that they'll say. And I'm always amazed that, I thought you would know better and different, that the onus is not on the victim, that perpetrators make decisions and they carry out their evil acts against the victim. But so there's this, I believe the culture of silence comes from, part of the culture of silence comes from values that have been passed down, how certain cultures deal with abuse, how certain cultures view women, and the role that we're ascribed in society. And so in some places, how we're seen as less than. And because we're seen as less than, and our role that was given to us, therefore, anything that was done to us by males, it can't possibly be their fault. It has to be something that we have done. And so women have long learned, victims mostly, and I'm talking about victims as women here. I know that men are victims too, but I'm speaking specifically to victims that are women here. Women have long known that if I'm going to manage this thing, I have to keep silent. And so we keep silent because they're also communities, churches that reinforce the message of silence. They are, when victims are not believed, things are not investigated properly. The church is split because people take sides, and victims are ostracized. And we see it in families where a similar thing will happen, where a disclosure would happen. People will shut you down and say that you're lying. So there's a second wound that is occurring. People shut you down and said, it didn't happen, that's not true. And you'll be ostracized if you are courageous enough or have support, you're old enough to make a decision to say, well, if this person is going to be at family gatherings, then I am not coming. And so your stance now single you out, and you become the scapegoat of the family. You become the black sheep or scapegoat, or the identified person that all of the troubles are dumped on. And you will be blamed for absolutely all the ills that has gone wrong in the family from there on. So I believe that those are some of the reasons people just stay silent, because the work of disclosing and blame and burden, the burden of responsibility that is given, that is added pressure, that is added pain that will be given to you by your family, by your church, by society. And so what I'll say to you, if you're a victim of sexual trauma, is find safe spaces where you can share it. Find a group for women who are healing from sexual abuse. Some groups are online, some groups are in person, sometimes there are groups in your community. Find a group of women who are healing from sexual abuse and find that safe space, or a group of trauma survivors. Sometimes you have trauma stabilization groups that are run in different places. Find one of those places where it will be safe, where the people that are there are able to witness your story with you. And they're able to hold space with you, cry with you, hold the room while you cry. They're able to minister to you in ways that will be deep and meaningful to you. So there might not be the largest space where you can share. For example, in your family or in your church or in your community, but you might be able to share in those smaller, safer spaces where you'll be held and heard, where you'll be believed, where your story will be witnessed, where you can start processing and healing from the story. And as you're processing and healing, you're gaining courage, your resilience levels are increasing, and you'll be able to manage the triggers, the memories, the different things that comes with sexual trauma. What I want to say is, and I said this with when I interviewed Allison yesterday, is that it's not a journey that you can take on your own to heal. And the reason is there are amazing books out there. There are amazing workbooks out there. I create workbooks for people. But one of the things I will say is it's so important for the story to be witnessed, for the process as you process it, that you're talking to somebody about it, that you're heard, things are reflected back to you. And that's not something that you can do on your own. And you just save yourself so much more pain, and the length of time that you will take to do it. And you don't know what you don't know. So there are going to be places that you won't know how to go, questions you won't know how to ask yourself, and answers you won't be able to give, where somebody else might be able to walk that with you and help you to externalize feelings, to normalize certain things, to change your narrative, to fix the negative thoughts, to challenge the story and the narrative, and to move on with a new story that is anchoring you in truth so that you can move forward. So I hope that you'll find such a space if this is you and you realize there are places where you kept silent, you've never shared it, you've never told anyone. And a story that is witnessed is a powerful thing. When somebody can witness and hold space and shame, there's no shame or judgment in that space. It really is a healing space. And I wish that for you. I hope that you will find that and that you'll be able to start your journey or continue your journey of healing. Thank you for joining me in this episode of Stories That Shape Us. I hope you'll join me on the next story.